Who do we look to for help when we seem to be all alone and in total darkness as life tosses us about? Let's understand that the one who loves us will come to our rescue. Let's look at the story of a small boat in a stormy sea in Matthew 14, verses 22 to 33. In Matthew 14, verses 22 and 23, Jesus told his disciples to go before him to the other side. He went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Sometimes it's as if he's also sent us forth alone. As God, Jesus is everywhere at all times, but sometimes it seems like he sent us on ahead for some reason. Sometimes it's because Jesus has a special miracle planned for us. The crowd wanted to make Jesus an earthly king. When seduced by worldly promotion that's not in God's plan, find a solitary place to pray. Ask heaven to keep us from the egotism that leads us away from his will. In Matthew 14, verse 24, we read that the boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves. The disciples were where Jesus had sent them, but they seemed in trouble. Shallow lakes are known for dangerous storm waves. Sometimes, when we believe with our whole hearts that we are where Jesus wants us, things seem to go wrong. We doubt our calling. Sometimes Jesus sends us to sea, even though he knows a storm is coming. We face winds of false doctrine, waves of temptation, and storms of mistreatment. Jesus is not trying to hurt us, but teach us to walk by faith and not by sight. In Matthew 14, verse 25, we read, "Now in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went to them walking on the sea." The fourth watch was the last night watch, from about 3 a.m. to sunrise. Sometimes in Christian life, Jesus allows us to go through most of the night before he comes to us. And when he does, he may come in the form of a miracle, a supernatural event that's beyond any natural explanation, like walking on water. God often chooses to intervene just before we lose hope, so as to not overly try us. In Job 9, verse 8, we read, "He treads on the waves of the sea." In Matthew 14:26, we read that when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying it's a ghost, and they cried out for fear. When God appeared on the mountain to ancient Israel, they were afraid, and when Jesus walked on water, the disciples were afraid at first. Sometimes we may be afraid to invite God into our situations, yet we need to remember that like with Israel and the disciples, God shows up in such a manner because we're highly favored. As they thought that Jesus was an apparition, we too can think that Jesus is somebody else, but he comes to bless. In Matthew 14:27, after the disciples' initial fear, seeing Jesus walking on water, we read, "But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, 'Be of good cheer. It's I. Don't be afraid.'" In the midst of storm, wind, and waves, Jesus spoke. He must have been close to them. The boat is an ancient Christian symbol of disciples tossed to and fro with trials of faith, temptations, and mistreatment. Yet Jesus calms the storms and provides safety. In church architecture, the center is the nave, meaning ship. Noah was brought to safety. Jesus comes to our boat and carries us through the storms to eternity. In Matthew 14, verses 28 and 29, we read that Peter asked Jesus to let him walk on water too. So he said, "Come." And when Peter had come down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. Some are bold like Peter and jump right in. There's no criticism of that personality here. There's an example of what someone can accomplish with God's help in their initial rush of faith and desire to be with Jesus. Studies have shown that of all those who rush forward at modern forms of evangelistic rallies, only about 15% join a church and stay. Spontaneity is good. Perseverance is better. After Peter's impetuosity and Jesus granting his request to walk on water, he quickly began to doubt. We read in Matthew 14:30, "But when he saw that the wind was boisterous, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, saying, 'Lord, save me!'" There's often a conflict between sight and faith. Faith is the evidence of things not seen. Moments like this have come to all of us. We begin to sink in life's stormy waters and realize that we have more zeal than faith. We've had our eyes on our tempestuous circumstances and not on Christ. Then we cry out, "Lord, save me." Peter had attempted to walk on water. Jesus stretched out his hand to catch him. So Jesus said in Matthew 14, verses 31 to 33, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. Peter did a good thing, stepping out on faith. He didn't continue in faith. This is not the devil's temptation, a foolish leap from the Temple Mount. That would be wrong. Stepping out of the boat and walking on water begins with a prayer request, followed by an invitation from Jesus to come. Then, like the disciples, we cry, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Sometimes we seem to be all alone at night in a storm at sea. When we're tossed by waves of temptation and doubt, Jesus comes to us in the midst of a dark night and calms the waters.